Most Americans remember Valley Forge, Yorktown, maybe even Trenton. But few know that in August of 1776, the entire American Revolution nearly came to a crushing end. It happened not in some distant frontier, but in what is now the heart of New York City. This is the story of the Battle of Brooklyn, also known as the Battle of Long Island, and George Washington's narrow escape from total annihilation. It was just weeks after the Declaration of Independence. The British were not amused. King George III had dispatched the largest expeditionary force Britain had ever assembled. Over 30,000 troops, including elite Hessian mercenaries. Their mission? Crush the rebellion fast and reclaim the colonies. More than 400 British ships, stretching across the horizon, sailed into New York Harbor. At the time, New York's population was less than 25,000. The invading force nearly outnumbered the entire city. For New Yorkers watching from rooftops and shorelines, it was an awe-inspiring and terrifying sight. Washington, commander of the Continental Army, had moved his forces to New York after evacuating Boston earlier that spring. Though he had won the siege of Boston, he knew the British would return stronger. And New York, with its ports and strategic location along the Hudson River, was their likely target. He was right, but his position was far from secure. The Continental Army lacked experience, supplies, and central command. Washington chose to defend both Manhattan and Long Island simultaneously, spreading his already thin forces across the region. It was a high-risk decision, intended to protect New York as a whole, but it would expose his army to divided engagements. His intelligence network was still in its infancy. Washington misjudged British intentions, believing they would strike Manhattan first. He underestimated how easily the British could flank his positions on Long Island. Washington's troops dug in at key defensive points: Gowanus Heights, Cobble Hill, Red Hook. Many soldiers had never seen combat. The army was a patchwork of volunteers, militias, and regulars from different colonies, some with different languages and customs. Coordination was difficult. On August 22nd, 1776, British troops began their assault, landing on the shores of Long Island. What followed was a well-executed flanking maneuver. General William Howe led 10,000 British troops around the American left flank, marching undetected through the Jamaica Pass. The Americans never saw it coming. Surprised and surrounded, the Continental forces began to fall apart. Confusion reigned. Units fled in all directions. In a desperate attempt to hold the line, a group of Maryland troops, later remembered as the Maryland 400, launched a suicidal counterattack near the old stone house. Most were killed, but their sacrifice bought Washington precious time to reinforce his position and avoid total collapse. Washington was present on the battlefield, but could do little to alter the course of the fight. His lack of seasoned commanders in key positions showed. Still, he refused to panic. Even in the face of mounting losses, he worked to steady morale and maintained control. By the end of August 27, more than 1,000 American soldiers were killed or captured. The British had secured Brooklyn Heights, and Washington's army was backed up against the East River. Facing annihilation, Washington made a desperate decision: evacuate. In one of the most remarkable moments in military history, he ordered a secret nighttime retreat across the East River to Manhattan. Local fishermen familiar with the tides helped man the boats. Oars were muffled with cloth to prevent noise. Orders were given in whispers. And then, as dawn approached, something extraordinary happened. A thick fog rolled in, cloaking the operation in near total invisibility. Washington personally oversaw the evacuation of more than 9,000 soldiers, artillery, horses, and supplies. He was the last to leave the shore. One British patrol boat reportedly came within earshot, but never realized what was happening through the mist. Not a single life was lost during the crossing, but the danger was far from over. As British forces pressed north through Manhattan, Washington's army fought delaying actions at Harlem Heights and retreated again through the Bronx and into New Jersey. It was a month-long scramble to survive. It was the closest the revolution ever came to complete failure. Had the British pressed their advantage, or had the fog lifted just hours earlier, Washington's army could have been trapped or destroyed. There would be no Trenton, no Valley Forge, no Yorktown. There would be no United States of America. Many of the soldiers who escaped that night went on to fight in those future battles. Some officers later wrote they had never seen Washington look more exhausted or more resolute. The British, meanwhile, were baffled. General Howe had victory in his grasp and let it slip away. Washington's resolve in that moment and his ability to retreat in the face of disaster became as defining as any victory. The Battle of Brooklyn is often forgotten, overshadowed by more glamorous victories, but it may have been the most important moment of the war, not because the Americans won, but because they survived. George Washington's narrow escape from the jaws of defeat gave the revolution a second chance, and with it, the future of the United States. This was nearly the end of the American experiment before it even began. And yet, in the darkness and fog of Brooklyn, the hope of a nation endured. Subscribe to You Left That Part Out for more forgotten moments that shaped history.